Siwa, Monique, Indigenous, Lenapehoking, aka Lenapehoking, hello everybody. My name is Monique Tyndall. I am the Director of Cultural Affairs for Stockbridge-Munsee Band of Mohicans. And my community, we are located today in north central Wisconsin. So we are Munsee speaking Lenape peoples. And that is like one of the three historic dialects of the Lenape people. There are two that are spoken today, one being Unami, that's where Lenapehoking pronunciation comes from Munsee for my people, is Lenapehoking. So there are those two living dialects, not 13 dialects of the Lenape. If you know that pop culture reference, if not, please check out Ghosts. It's a really good episode. So I just wanted to share with you all just a quick overview of our story and where our traditional homelands are. And this isn't representing the Stockbridge-Munsee peoples, but also our northern relatives, the Munsee, Delaware, and Munsee First Nations in southwestern Ontario, who I want to acknowledge for their gratitude, their generosity in assisting my community with revitalizing the Munsee language. And so we see here in the red is Mohican homelands, and like to the south is like Munsee homelands. And we have here the different removals that took place that my tribal community had experienced. And so like with a lot of our work, even though with us being in Wisconsin, we still do work here in our homelands. And even despite like those series of removals, we have always returned back to our homelands, whether it's to do work as representatives for our nation, ensuring that our treaties are upheld and acknowledged, and then also to maintain our connection to our lands and to gather up any other remaining tribal peoples who were still out in the homelands to gather them with us so that they could stay with our nation. So the Cultural Affairs Department has three different program areas, one being historic preservation, language, and the library museum, which is where I am stationed at. I come from a museum studies background, did my undergrad at Institute of American Indian Arts and then in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and then my master's at Gulcher through their cultural sustainability program. And so during that time is when we started implementing Nukutu, and that's where we became introduced to the traditional knowledge label. So this is like one project that we have that is, we are a project partner on with Wisconsin Library Services, who's the Midwest Nukutu Hub. And it's through an IMLS grant that we were able to take a lot of our digitized family photographs and get them uploaded into Nukutu through the assistance of the Tribal Libraries, Archives, and Museums course at UW-Madison's High School. And the reason why this project is very important is because we're going to be working with the community to verify that everybody who's identified in these photographs in our catalog, that it is valid and that we have the opportunity to make any corrections. And then also if any of the families want to share any cultural narratives or oral histories connected to their families, the individuals in the photographs, we can record that as well. So we've been starting to implement some of the TK labels in that way. So here we have selected 4 TK labels for this project. So right now we have the community voices because we want to encourage the tribal community to share content with the collections. And right now we have non-verified because we haven't spoken to the family yet. So once we've spoken to those families and we're able to get everything vetted, then we can use the verified label. And then also we have here non-commercial, and then we also have the community's TK label. And a lot of our work is within Nukutu and the local and the TK labels is informed by our traditional governance, which is like station. So that's like where this really embodies the value of respect. And then another counselor role was the runner. So that's where we have responsibility was their core value. We have hero, which embodies that reciprocity. And then we also have the owl, which was also the person who was in charge of ensuring that the knowledge of our people was kept and those protocols were kept as well, and they built those relationships. And then this photograph here is actually for tribal members. They were all students of the Carlisle Industrial School, and the young lady in the lower right-hand corner was my great-grandmother, Pauline Peters, who was a survivor of Carlisle Indian School. Another way that we're using the TP labels is for public education in our homelands. So this is an example of a panel that was recently installed at the Williams Historical Society. And we use the TK labels, non-commercial and outreach, because that's one thing we always want to ensure is that when we're sharing our knowledge, our information about our histories, our people, the work that we're doing, we want to ensure that people understand that this is for outreach purposes, and it's not to be commercialized, it's not to be, no one is to profit off of that. And so this is some of the work that we've been doing in our homelands. Previously, this small historical society had some content about Native peoples, but it wasn't very accurate and was quite offensive, and some of it could be comedic. As far as like the way they described us, like one reference was that they stated that we walked in single files as if we were ants. So and we really wanted to like get that laminated it's great material. You know, we all have creatives and writers, which they could definitely make a few episodes out of that. But you know, but it mysteriously disappeared. So yes, this is some of like the wonderful work that we've been doing, and then like looking at like how we can use the TK labels just to engage with the public. So other ways that we're looking at using TK labels is land acknowledgements. So this is an example of a land acknowledgement that was previously approved by our tribe, but then later on there was a corporation that came in and inserted themselves into the acknowledgement, and we didn't know about it. Like the staff at the Land Conservancy didn't know what to do. They were just trying to do their best, and so we found out through one of the locals who was using the trails, and they knew who we were. You know, they knew to contact our historic preservation officer, and then who alerted me. So we were able to get that corrected as well. So that's one thing, is like looking at, well, can the TK labels be used in real life? Can they be a sticker and be used as a form of activism and corrections? So like if this was a land acknowledgement that someone's seen and knew that the information on it wasn't correct, could they just slap up a non-verified TK label with the QR code? So, you know, that's like some of the things that we've been kind of entertaining here. So this is an example of a handout card that was part of a traditional plant garden that was installed at the Stockbridge Mission House in Stockbridge, Massachusetts. We have ongoing partnerships with the trustees who have like different historic sites that they manage. And so with one of our community members who works with the ethnobotany of our tribe wanted to share like some of our base plants and how some of the history behind it. So here we have like Joe Pyeweed, And on the printed handout cards, we included those TK labels down there, you know, and we also included that there's multiple communities because we're referencing some Anishinaabe knowledge that we found that was documented about some of what the Jopai could be referring to in their language. And that's one thing, like with the Anishinaabe and Ojibwe, they're Algonquin speaking people, so we come from the same language family. So a lot of our words are kind of similar, and how our language is built is similar to it, even with some of the descriptions of like certain words are sometimes they're identical. And that just goes back to this old ancestral knowledge of this oral history about us all being like one great nation, talking about all the Algonquin language speaking peoples. And of course, we have the non-commercial, and that this is for outreach purposes only. And then looking forward, seeing ways that we can include some of those biocultural labels as well. And that concludes my presentation. When we'll end it.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Darren Ranco. I'm a Penobscot Nation citizen and chair of the learning programs at the University of Maine. And I really want to know how to put a circle into the PowerPoint. Learning lots of things here. So I want to talk about some of the work that we're doing in the context of the University of Maine and in my homeland. So the University of Maine, we have quite clear, it's in Penobscot Nation homelands, and I live and work in my own territory, which is quite a blessing. We're going to talk about memorandum of understanding, MOUs, memoranda of understanding. I was a classics major, so I conjugate memorandum. So I do want to give a context for this work in our territory, and Jane and her crew are frequent visitors to our homelands and across the Okanagan territory, and just to give you a sense of our tribal locations in terms of the seats of our governments, or where our communities are centered in what is now Maine. But as Wabanaki folks, we are connected across the border and see our territory as extending into now Eastern Canada as well. And I bring about this slide. Of course, you never know like how slides are going to present, but believe me when I say that on this map you see on Marsh Island, which is the central piece of the island there, in the bottom part where the University of Maine is located, and the next island up the Penobscot River is Indian Island, or the People's Island, just how close we are at the University of Maine, and Marsh Island actually is the center of our traditional village site that actually is on the other end from where the university of our traditional village site is on the other end where the university is located. But this is really the core elements of our territory is where the University of Maine is located. Another framework to understand where we're at is that Marsh Island is Wasupskig and Menahan, or Slippery Ledge, or at the Slippery Ledges Island, and that's referring to and my friend and colleague and co-conspirator James Francis, who hopefully will be here later on. Did he make the plane? Yeah, so he had another speaking engagement, but he's sorry, I have this on the time to go quickly. Clearly, I'm technology is so master of but another way that we think about our territory is its work reflects these connections through we see it through the upriver orientation and the canoe and all sorts of other things. So this slippery ledge is critical to our navigation in our homeland, in our sacred river. So, okay, MOU. I just want to locate, like, where am I from? Yeah. In May of 2018, outgoing president of the University of Maine, Sue Hunter, signed an MOU with our chief, who's still our chief, Kurt Francis, which is related to the cultural heritage items and TK labels, to become clear. But this, of course, came at the end of a process, right? You don't start with an MOU. And the level of specificity in this MOU reflects nearly a decade's worth of work, and probably more actually in terms of the museum work, because I think, Jen, like Gretchen has been at the forefront of this in our museum for decades, really reaching out and engaging with our tribal citizens to think about the caretaking roles that she has in a university museum. So probably 20 years in the making. The purpose of the MOU is to think about, and I'll have more of a slide about this, but this sort of collaboration developing over the management of Penobscot cultural heritage over, I said 10 years, 20 years. This work comes from tribal nation collaboration over many years, broad institutional priorities to center Indigenous research, clearly identified roles and responsibilities, university recognition, and tribal nation data sovereignty and decolonization benefits all of us. So that was a pitch. I returned to my homelands in 2009. They hired me. It was one of those situations where I was talking to the provost at the university at the time. She's like, "Why isn't there more collaboration where we have, students, but we're so close?" And she'd been at University of Minnesota Duluth, and I was like, "Well, if you want to do this, in a better way, you need to do X, Y, and Z things," and sort of, that's like writing my job description. So don't ever answer those questions, honestly. That'll really mess you up for a whole life. Okay. So this, and I call this a new model of collaboration because we identify that in the MOU as it's where the Penobscot Nation University of Maine is seeing together our roles and responsibilities, our caretaking roles in particular, around these cultural heritage items that are controlled by the University of Maine on some level, although the point of the MOU is so the university will have less control and will have more control as decolonization efforts work. So it really was to integrate Penobscot voice perspectives in the university process needs and collections. And it also recognizes that the university has a responsibility to work with my tribe, Penobscot Nation, through our Tribal Rights and Resource Protection Board, which we affectionately call the Perturbed Board. I don't know, it's probably why it doesn't meet very often. It's a floating thing. But this is where the interface between university and the tribe, and so all of us on this board are tribal citizens. It's a function or sort of appointed by our tribal council, so it's a part of our tribal government, but it has as its purpose of organizing this work for our nation. The MOU itself addresses 5 different areas of concern. The first is IRBs. I'm going to talk about the care and management of our collections in the museum and in the library in more detail. But there's also part of this University of Maine Press where intellectual property things are impacted, as well as archaeological collections held in the anthropology department. And I can go on about the IRB stuff too. The shorthand of that is that in this agreement, there is a Penobscot Nation representative on the University of Maine IRB. That person happens to be me. It doesn't have to be me. It's just that, like, you're already over there. And it's just, I love university meetings, like, if they're on Zoom, can we do that more? My question. Okay, so the Hudson Museum here in this part, and these are, this is very much like written, and Jane wrote, I don't know, 80% of it. I wrote like 15% of it, and 5% was, blue stuff, I guess. But the idea that we really wanted to identify key roles and responsibilities in this kind of MOU, providing a permanent Wabanaki seat on the Hudson Museum Board of Directors, informing the policies of the management. And this is, again, Gretchen Faulkner, who's the director of the Hudson Museum on our campus. It's an anthropological museum, and like a lot of university museums, has like the most random collection that you can possibly imagine. People traveling the world, sometimes back. A feature of this collection, though, is a very purposeful collection that has been in collaboration with Maine Indian Basket Lines and other Indigenous organizations locally, also manages a really important collection of our materials as well as people, and actually houses collections that are not owned by the University of the Museum, but it serves of tribal partners. But this also serves the TK label approach, collaboration around the documentation, cataloging, digital sharing of the collections, and establishment of TK labels at the Hudson as well. Here at the library, and you can see at the same time as the MOU, we also finalized wording on our land acknowledgement, and also finalized signage, a bilingual signage project for campus. So it was, a lot of us are suspicious of land acknowledgements, or increasingly so. Before we did that at the University of Maine, I wanted structural shifts around authorities and knowledge. So that involved the signage work as well as assembly. So the idea that we wouldn't really let people say a land acknowledgement and feel good about it until there was actually shifting authorities that were really purposeful. Somehow in May of 2018, God, I'm so glad it wasn't 2 years later. That would have been harder because of the pandemic. So here in the library, the library special collections has a lot of materials, and they benefited from a whole series of even more extractive kinds of work connected to our tribes and in what is now Maine. But really, again, we wanted to impact, a new model of co-curation, making that as the goal, inclusive decision-making, permission over use and circulation of Penobscot cultural materials. And in the document in the MOU, there is a sort of, and this, you see this in other agreements that Jane and local contacts have been a part of, where if something is labeled as culturally sensitive, so beyond any sort of legal ramifications, we have this kind of category of culturally sensitive items that, if they circulate, that we as the tribes see as potentially harmful if they're uncirculated. So we can put a stop to circulation. This includes loans from the Hudson, as well as materials from special collections, which there are a number of important linguistic documents and all sorts of other things. So this is also where the TK labels are play. Again, the anthropology department, and we're lucky enough to have the Penobscot Nation citizen as one of the archaeologists for the region, Monique, who knows his collection. It's if anyone knows anything about archaeology at universities, that people are constantly training students, and they have materials in the department. They're often not very well cataloged or communicated, unlike museums, which, because of things like NAGPRA, it had to be more. I mean, they ignore NAGPRA, but that's it. But the idea that they got to the public departments where there's like collections, no one's really sure about what their status is. And we really wanted to identify those items in this collection as potential resources for our tribe. Bonnie also happens to have previously been our tribal historic preservation officer. So this again, we're so close. It's a very unusual kind of situation. We wanted to identify that. And I'm going to stop there. We're going to talk more this afternoon about work that we're doing related to biocultural notices and other partnerships we have with the tribes. There's all sorts of other works, so. Yeah, it wasn't too long and I got in a few later.